What's up, friends? Welcome back to the channel. Look, there's been a massive push in right-wing evangelical Christian spaces to really start demonizing Islam and Muslims. In fact, I've been tracking a lot of these apologetic accounts, and it's really been unbelievable, especially considering there have been some major stories that have come out of Christians attacking peaceful Muslims in America for exercising their First Amendment right. So I found a video by a charismatic YouTuber named Isaiah Saldivar, who does this whole monologue talking about how demonic and evil and terrible Islam is and how it's taking over Europe and how if we're not careful, it's going to happen in America. And I wanted to refute this and respond to it in real time, but I'm not Muslim. I'm a Christian. I'm not an expert on that subject. So I brought a friend along to join me. I brought my friend Qasim Rashid, a human rights lawyer, activist, and also a Muslim, to help me and you better understand what Islam actually is and to refute some of this BS. So Qasim, good to see you, my friend.
Peace, brother. Great to be here with you again.
Absolutely. I'm very much looking forward to this. Because I know that so much of this is hogwash, but my understanding of a different religion is, of course, as you would imagine, very limited. And I will say, as someone who's now been friends with you for, I think, over 2 years now, I've learned a lot just from what you've had to tell me about, yeah, this is actually in Islam, this part. Because I'll say, as a kid who grew up in conservative evangelicalism, you're kind of given this version of Islam through these like apologetics actors who are giving you just a lot of things that maybe aren't even blatantly true, or they're kind of distorted, and you're just taught that Islam is this inferior, barbaric religion, and that the Christians, especially this kind of Christianity, is peaceful and loving and the backbone of everything good and pure in the world. And so I'm excited to have you on to maybe respond to this video and debunk it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I mean, I think this is the kind of dialogue that we need more of, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to do this. One day we'll need to do this in person, breaking bread together as well, but let's dive in.
I would love that. All right, let's dive in. So I got my shot up here. Friends, you know the drill. You have seen me do these response videos before. We're going to go through this video. It's about 13 minutes long. We're probably going to pause pretty often. I'm not going to lie, but that's how this stuff works. What was it? Wait, you sent me something. I want to read it. You sent me something. What is it here? It's called
Brandolini's Law.
Yes, Brandolini's Law, which states the amount of energy needed to refute bullshit is an order of magnitude bigger than that needed to produce it. And that is so true, I think, as we're going to discover here. So, friends, just an FYI, Isaiah is an online charismatic YouTuber. He also does, like, deliverances. He's very big on the demonic oppression of people. He even has on his website a form you can fill out to get demonic deliverance and even practice it on your friends. So it's very interesting to see how deep into the supernatural he is, and you're going to hear a lot of that coming out as he talks about Islam. So, without further ado, here we go.
Yeah, we need to talk about what's going on. That is the invasion of Islam. Yes, that's what's happening. We're seeing it right now with the mayor of New York pretty much saying that New York is going to funnel in Muslims and Islam from all over the world. He's going to funnel them in, bring them in, these immigrants, and they're going to take over. And that is what...
Okay, pause.
I just want to talk about the framing already, right? The idea that on one hand, these are the same folks that say, well, why won't Muslims assimilate? And Zoran says, you know what? I love this country. I'm going to run for office and do it the right way by meeting people where they are, earning the vote through the democratic process. And now that is called an invasion. My guy, he's literally following the democratic process as enshrined in our Constitution. What about democracy do you consider an invasion? So I just want to recognize the entire framing here is absurd.
Yeah, no, great point. Also, I'm not aware of those statements you said about them, about Mamdani trying to, bring in all these, radical Muslims. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, this seems absurd to me. Okay. All right. Well, we made it 30 seconds in, so I guess job well done. Here we go.
trying to do. We're going to cover some of those videos later. But before we do that, I just want to talk to you about the history of Islam if you don't know. For those that are confused, Islam is the religion and Muslims are the followers of that religion. I know there's a lot of confusion between what's the difference between Islam and Muslims. Muslims are followers of Islam. And I'm going to say here unapologetically, there is no room for this barbaric religion in the West. There's no room in any West, anywhere.
Paused.
You know, the irony of that statement is that Muslims were in the West before America existed. Up to a third of the Africans enslaved by European so-called Christian white supremacists, about a third of them were Muslim. They were trafficked here. They were forced to forget their faith, forced to eat pork, forced to drink alcohol, denied the opportunity to speak Arabic or whatever their indigenous language was from Africa, and then forced to convert into Christianity. And this is enshrined in America's history books. And it's important for listeners and viewers to note this, because everything that this person subsequently accuses Muslims of trying to do, the colonizers who enslaved African Muslims actually did do.
Yep.
This guy must be a drive-in movie theater because the projection is wild. There's nothing that he's actually claiming that Muslims are doing that wasn't actually literally done by these European colonizers. So let me just stop. Make that point before we continue.
Yeah, no, that's really wise. A recurring theme we're going to see, and I'll call it out, folks, as we go along, is this: every accusation really is a confession. I mean, Isaiah is part of the Christian Nationalist, movement, which is inherently violent. It wants to take over. It wants to eliminate the rule of law and democracy to rebuild it in its own image. So I'm right there with you. That's a great point, calling that out.
World, there's no room for this, because what their book, the Quran, teaches is barbaric. They teach to kill the unbelievers, to kill the infidels, to kill those that do not believe in what they teach. And this is taking over, and we cannot let this happen.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the reality, I'll bring up two really important points. One, a contemporary point. There was a recent study analysis done, you can link it, that actually looked at the violent verses in the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Quran. And they found that of those three scriptures, the most violent is the Old Testament. The next most violent is the New Testament. And the least violent, the most peaceful, is actually the Quran. This is an independent analysis. But more importantly, the only time the Quran permits fighting of any sort is in self-defense. And that's to protect universal religious freedom. The Quran explicitly, chapter 22, verse 40 to 41, explicitly commands Muslims that you must protect churches and synagogues and temples even before you protect mosques from attack. This is not my interpretation. The literal words are there to protect churches and synagogues and temples from attack. And when you look at the early history of Islam, and even after the Prophet died, you see example after example of Muslims fighting to protect synagogues from being attacked, to protect churches from being attacked. The letter that he wrote to the St. Catherine's Monastery at Sinai is still intact today, where he commands Muslims to protect Christians, to protect Christian women from being persecuted for their faith, to protect churches and monks. So we have not just the word written, but the example given to protect universal religious freedom. To turn that on its head and claim that there's any permission to kill non-believers is not only the height of absurdity, it's the height of hypocrisy. It is the exact fear-mongering and hate that Jesus Christ himself so loudly and eloquently and beautifully condemned.
No, well said. My only contribution to your beautiful monologue there is just to say that it is wild to me as a Christian that I was given all the tools to explain away the very direct calls for violence towards the unbeliever in the Hebrew Bible. I mean, that God commands the killing of women, children, men. I mean, there are many passages that are brutal, that are graphic, and that do, sanction violence against, innocent people. But there's a whole apologetic world that helps you understand how, well, that was back then, this is today. But Isaiah is, even if what he said was quote unquote true, he's never going to be able to give that same kind of empathy or understanding or contextual awareness to the Quran, because for him, his mind is made up that this is a false, evil religion, but my religion is true and good. Therefore, I can explain away the ugly parts of my holy book while hyperinflating and exaggerating, right? the holy book of my so-called enemy. And I think that's really important to highlight here.
Well said. Well said.
I'll give you the history first. Islam begins in Saudi Arabia in the 7th century under the teaching of Muhammad.
Saudi Arabia didn't exist until like the 1850s or something. So I don't know what the Saudi is a political clan. It's like saying the United States began under the MAGA movement. And like, it's such a silly statement to make. Yes, it was established in Arabia in 570, not in 570, when the Prophet was born in 570. It was established in, when he was 40 years old in 610. But the idea that he's calling it Saudi Arabia is so laughably funny. It just tells me there's no shred of integrity or accuracy in his statements. But anyway, just wanted to make that point clear.
No, it's important to highlight because these kinds of people think that they're qualified to talk about everything. They think that whatever is in the cultural zeitgeist, they are somehow experts on. And this guy, by the way, he's saying it with his full chest, right? This guy's saying it with confidence. Let me give you the facts about how Islam started. And the first thing he says, you're like, you're already wrong, bro. You're already on the wrong foot here. Yeah, good point.
Muslims believe was God's final prophet. The name of the religion, again, is Islam. People that follow are Muslims. The Muslims' God is Allah. Muhammad claims, so this is a guy that claims that a supernatural being...
Sure.
Allah is just Arabic for God. It's the proper noun name for God. Arab Christians in Palestine will call Allah God Allah. That's just what they do. So it's not like the Muslim God.
Right.
It is the name of God in Arabic. So I want to be very clear about that. I know plenty of Arab Christians here in the United States, plenty of Arab Christians living in Palestine, who, by the way, are suffering genocide under the Israeli brutal apartheid regime. They're Christians, and they happen to be Arab as well. There are many such. To erase them is pretty anti-Christian, if you ask me.
100%. No, I think it just shows this white Christian nationalist bent that Isaiah is just steeped in, right? He can't even see how it's it's God in a different language. That's all this is. Yeah. It's like Jesus and Jesus, it's the same kind of idea.
Visited him in a cave while he was meditating and told him to read. But Muhammad told the spirit that he couldn't read. Yet 2 more times the spirit told Muhammad to read. Finally, he told Muhammad to recite and gave him some verses to memorize. When this first encounter was over, Muhammad thought he had been visited by a demon, which he was, by the way. Let me just throw that in there. He was visited by a demon.
All right, go ahead.
So the beauty of this experience is that, one, it mimics the experience that past prophets of God had shown us as a means of finding God. Jesus in the desert, Moses on the mountain, the isolation that these noble men of God experienced before being visited by an angel of God, or by being visited by God, and where God or God's angel revealed to them that they are the one chosen by God to convey the message to the people. It was the angel that visited Mary to convey to her that she would give birth as a virgin to Christ. When no man had touched her, as the Quran attests to as well. By the way, the Quran is the only other scripture that attests to the virgin birth of Jesus Christ. And this was the angel Gabriel that revealed to the prophet that he was that prophet, the final law-bearing prophet foretold in ancient scriptures that would come to revive faith and revive humanity and unite humanity under its flag of peace. And the second point I want to bring up is the beauty of the very first word that was revealed is Iqra. Iqra means to read, to recite. And that basically encompasses what Islam is. It's not war. It's not violence. It's not compulsion. It's to read, is to educate, is to convey, is to effectively be a messenger for peace and for good. And what he did at that time was not say, I was visited by a demon. No, he expressed fear and confusion because of the awe and the majesty of God coming to him, and thought, how can I be the one? Because this is what every noble person does. They say they're self-deprecating.
Right.
And in fact, he went to his wife, Khadija, and she took him to who? And this is such an important note in history that most people don't realize. She took him to a scholar named Waraka bin Nawfal. Now, Waraka bin Nawfal was a Christian. He was a scholar of Hebrew, of Aramaic, and Arabic. And Waraka bin Nawfal himself attested that this was the same angel. This is the words of a Christian scholar at that time, mind you. He attested that this is the same angel that visited Mary, the same angel that visited past prophets of God. And he said, I can only wish that I would be alive in the future when your people turn on you. I would certainly stand with you. And the prophet exhibited confusion that why would the people turn on me? I have lived a life of nobility among them. They attest to my truthfulness. By the way, his nickname among the Arabs was the truthful and the righteous. And Waraka bin Nawfal, a Christian scholar, said, this is the path of all prophets. And as Jesus Christ himself said, that a prophet is not without honor except amongst his own land and his own people.
Right.
So this was what happened in that initial. Sorry to make this a long monologue, but this was the initial interaction. That the first instinct that his wife had was, let me take you to the most learned scholar of religion I know. It was a Christian scholar who happened to be her cousin. And he, based on his knowledge of the Bible, of the Torah, attested this exact fact to Prophet Muhammad.
Well, I can definitely confirm that I was never told that story in my white evangelical upbringing. So thank you for enlightening me and the audience. It's really helpful. And again, it just goes to show like how off the mark Isaiah is. But as a Pentecostal Christian, deeply embedded in this Christian nationalist ideal, anything that is not of his view of God is inherently demonic, right? Whether it's certain types of people, it's liberals, different religions. So this is very much on brand for Isaiah to say that. Of course, hearing it now outside of that bubble, I'm almost embarrassed. I'm embarrassed and mortified that you're on the stream with me, hearing this dude, call Muhammad, influenced by demons. Like I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I want to apologize. It's so gross, frankly. Anyway.
No, but we're having the dialogue, and I think the goal here is not to prove any faith true or false, is to recognize the humanity and the importance of recognizing the diversity of humanity. That's how we move forward together.
Agreed.
This was a demon that visited him. Like most cults, it starts with a demonic spirit. And he became depressed, he became suicidal, but his wife and her cousin convinced him that he'd been visited by the angel Gabriel and said that he was a prophet. Muhammad continued to have these visitations throughout his lifetime, that is, being visited by demons, who his wife told him was Gabriel.
Can I just say the audacity of this man to literally impose his own twisted interpretation of what he thinks happened thousands of years ago, right? Like here's a guy saying, hey, don't believe the actual story. Don't believe, what they actually said back then. I'm telling you what happened, 1,000+ years removed from all this. Like the audacity of this man to speak so confidently about something which he knows so little about. I'm almost embarrassed for him in that sense. It's just embarrassing.
Yeah. Well said.
Later, Muhammad began preaching in the city of Mecca that there was no God but Allah. Most people in Mecca who worship idols of multiple gods scoffed at him, but he gathered a few disciples, some who were persecuted. In 622, Muhammad and his followers moved to Medina, which had a large Jewish population and were more receptive to monotheism, that's belief in one God. And this journey is called Hijrah. After 7 years in Medina, Muhammad's followers had grown, and they were strong enough to return and conquer Mecca, where Muhammad preached until he died in 632. This is AD. Islam spread rapidly after Muhammad's death as his disciples grew.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a lot he's going over. He's generally accurate, but there's a lot he's leaving out. One, they faced brutal persecution in Mecca for over a decade. And his companions asked for permission to fight. And he said, I have not been granted permission. You cannot create discord in the land. If you're facing persecution, you have 3 options. 1, you bear it with patience. 2, you try to convince them through reason to stop. Or 3, you emigrate and leave. Some bore it with patience. Some tried to convince them to stop the persecution. They didn't listen. And then they eventually left. And where did they go? They went to Abyssinia, which was under the Negus Ashtarma, a Christian king, a righteous Abyssinian Christian king who gave these Muslims refuge and saying, I quote, that Muhammad and Jesus are 2 rays of light from the same sun. He recognized the spirituality and the nobility of these people and recognized that this was a faith, a teaching that was so well aligned with Christianity, it couldn't possibly be an enemy. Now, when the Muslims finally did leave, they left everything behind. They refused to fight. They fled to Medina, where, yes, righteous Jewish residents of Medina accepted them, and they partnered together. This is one of the most important moments in history, because at this point in time, they established what's called the Constitution of Medina. This was a secular constitution that preceded our U.S. Constitution by 1,200 years and established universal religious freedom. Article 17 explicitly says that no Jewish person shall be wronged for being a Jewish person, meaning anti-Semitism was alive and well in ancient Arabia, and the Prophet himself adamantly condemned it. He went as far as to say that if there are any tribes who are allied with Muslims but are opposed to the Jewish people, Our alliance is to the Jewish people over those tribes because now we are one in the same community. He recognized the humanity. And this is an important moment in history because despite this alliance with the Jewish tribes of Medina, the Meccans continued to wage war and attack Muslims. And what he's talking about, that he returned and he conquered Mecca, that's a very simplistic whitewashing. They had signed a 10-year peace treaty with the Meccans finally to say, stop attacking us, no more war. We don't want war. We've literally left everything behind, stop attacking us. The Meccans then barbarically broke that treaty and killed innocent people. Upon that incident, then the Prophet marched on Mecca with 10,000 people. And what did he do? Stanley Lane Poole, a non-Muslim historian, records this, that the entire city was in the palm of his hand. He could have exacted revenge on every single person that had persecuted Muslims, that had killed his own children. And what did he do? He gave the flag of amnesty to Bilal, who was a former Abyssinian slave who the Prophet had freed and made a general. And he said, anyone who wants peace has the flag of Bilal, you will find your refuge in it. He forgave the entire city of Mecca on two conditions. One, that they accept Bilal and they go to Bilal for forgiveness. So, dismantling the white supremacy. And two, not that you convert to Islam, not that you accept Islam as your religion or that the Prophet is the Prophet of God. No, that you simply allow people to believe or not believe as they wish. So Christians could remain Christians, Jews could remain Jews, idol worshippers could remain idol worshippers, and Muslims could remain Muslims. That is what his conquering was. It was a conquering of hearts through love and compassion. And there's not a single example in history where you can point to where somebody was persecuted for more than 20 years, every treaty he signed brutally broken, and then when he came with massive power and had the upper hand, rather than exacting revenge, he offered peace to the entire continent of Arabia, the entire city of Mecca. Non-Muslim historians have, and so for him to just whitewash this is like, oh, well, he came back and he conquered.
Right.
It is a complete. It's actually unfortunate that his ignorance is just misleading people on something that was really a beautiful event in history about interracial and interfaith harmony.
No, I mean, well said. Again, for me, super educational. So no notes. Thank you. Really helpful.
Powerful with military conquest of the Middle East, North Africa, parts of Asia, and Southern Europe. The people.
What's it called? The Bandolini. Wait. What's the principle you said that we're dealing with here? Brandolini's law. Yeah, there you go. Here we are.
I'm just like, I'm laughing at this visual because he's making it seem like these guys were like ancient Muslims with AK-47s conquering Arabia. Like, give me a break. What is going on here? I'm sorry. It's just nonsensical, but please continue.
No, you're good. You're good.
By the Muslims had a choice: convert to Islam or pay a large fee. If they couldn't pay the fee, they were enslaved or executed. Islam became the dominant religion most of the Middle East and North Africa.
So let me pause again. So what he's referring to is what's called the jizya tax. And there's a couple of things that I want to talk about here because this tax, yes, there's the one part about this tax that is true is that this was the tax for non-Muslims living in a Muslim majority society. But you got to add the context. The context is that the tax imposed on Muslims was actually higher than the jizya tax. So by being Muslim, you paid a higher tax. And by the way, tell me, unless you're a billionaire who finds a way to escape taxes, every citizen of a country pays taxes to that country. I pay taxes, you pay taxes. That doesn't mean we're oppressed. It means that we want to be part of a functioning society. That's one. Two, Muslims had to pay a higher tax, and they served in the military for the country as well. Non-Muslims had no obligation to serve in the military, none whatsoever. The tax they paid was for protection. And then three, we have example after example after example in history when people who were unable to pay the tax were forgiven because the tax was not meant to be heavy-handed. It was not meant to be an oppression or burden. And moreover, we have multiple examples where when Muslims realized that they could no longer protect a community because they were being attacked or there was a war being waged and they were going to leave the area, they would return the tax money and say, hey, you gave us this tax money as a guarantee of protection. We don't have the means to protect you. So here is your tax money returned because we cannot take a tax when we haven't fulfilled our obligation as a government. So to paint this as some kind of this oppressive tax to persecute non-Muslims was nonsensical. It was actually a very low tax, lower than what the Muslims paid. It afforded them protection. It afforded them rights of public service. It afforded them UBI that Khalifa Umar established. And when Muslims couldn't fulfill their obligation, then they either returned the tax or they eliminated the tax altogether so it wouldn't be a burden on people. To claim that that's oppressive, I think it's missing the point altogether.
No, I would agree. Friends, if you're watching this video and you're enjoying what Qasim is saying, please make sure to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. I try and do as many of these as I can because there's so much to respond to. So thanks so much for making this possible. I really appreciate it. All right, let's keep going.
The Quran teaches that Muhammad was a man, not God, but he was God's last prophet. Thus, he had the final say on theology. Muhammad's revelations conflicted with the Bible, so Muslims say the Bible is corrupted and changed over time, and Muhammad died a natural death. And guess what? Let me throw this in there. Muhammad stayed dead. Jesus rose from the dead. Muhammad did not rise from the dead.
Okay, I want to respond to this part because, yeah, so a couple of things. First off, the Bible has changed. This is one of the biggest things that I find kind of laughable about fundamentalists in the Christian context, because the Bible has a very complicated assembly process. We have none of the original manuscripts. There have been editors all throughout its assembly. Different traditions fight over what books should be in there. Eastern Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant Bibles are all different. So again, like, this isn't complicated. It's not a bad thing. It's just a reality. But people like Isaiah believe in what's called inerrancy, the idea that the Bible that they hold in their hands is the Word of God directly with no faults, no errors. It's historically accurate. That's just not what it is. You're actually imposing a very modern framework to a very ancient collection of texts that come from a totally different world that I think are deeply impactful and spiritual and give us a window into how people thought about God then and what we could bring into it today. But to make it seem like, this is a slam dunk on Muslims or on Islam because, potentially they view the Bible as having flaws in it, is like, dude, progressive Christians think the Bible has flaws in it. That's not really a big deal. The other thing I want to address, and I just have to say this, as a Christian who does affirm a physical resurrection, okay, I think it is so pompous and ridiculous to make the statement, Muhammad is dead, but Christ didn't stay dead. We actually don't know that, okay? This is a belief that I hold, but I have no evidence. I have no hard evidence that Christ is living, and if he is, I don't know where he is. Is he in some other dimension? Is he breathing? Does he have a body? I just find it kind of silly that, like, Isaiah is going to be like, this is ridiculous that these people follow Muhammad who's dead, but I follow a guy who's alive. I just can't see, hear, touch, taste. I can't see him in any capacity. I have no hard evidence besides this collection of texts, which I have no original manuscripts of, and that's hard evidence that Jesus Christ definitely objectively rose again, but Muhammad's dead, so therefore I'm better than you. Like, it's a very flimsy argument, and I say that as someone who does believe that Christ rose again. However, I realize that's a very intense claim to make, and I would never impose it on other people because I realize that there's a level of faith there, right? So I just think it's really a silly a statement to make. But when you're in this bubble of evangelical fundamentalism, you think you're just slam dunking all the way. Isaiah thinks he's just nailing this, right? Like, I follow the risen Christ. I'm glad that you think that you do, and I would agree. But to make it seem like that's as true as the sky is blue and the grass is green, okay, you lost me at that part. You just did.
I beautifully said. I mean, I love your transparency and your authenticity, Tim. It's a beautiful, noble quality you have that I adore. I will also add that, as Muslims, we study the Bible still. And one thing that I will always attest to is that you can compare the Quran to the red letter edition of the words of Jesus, and you won't find a contradiction there. And so, where our, disagreements rest really is more with like what Paul wrote or what some of the later, apostles wrote. But in terms of the red letter edition, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a contradiction between that and the Quran. And I say that to talk about where there really is a lot of unity, because at the end of the day, Islam attests to the truth of Christ. It attests to the truth and the righteousness of Mary, mother of Jesus. There's a chapter named after Mary in the Quran. This is not appeasement. This is a recognition and acknowledgement of the divine origin of Jesus Christ and of Mary, mother of Jesus.
By the way, Isaiah disagrees with Paul. Because Paul tells women to be silent in church, and Isaiah believes in women pastors, right? So this is the great hypocrisy, right? I mean, Isaiah himself, I would disagree with Paul. When Paul says slaves obey your masters, I say no, you shouldn't do that, right? So this is a very common thing that even in Christianity we do. So I'm not at all offended or surprised to hear you say the same thing. Like, yeah, dude, I co-sign that. So all right, we'll keep it going here. Thanks for being here, friends. This is a lot of fun for me. I know Qasim enjoys it as well, and it's great to have people listening and watching, so thanks.
Muslims believe that he'll be the first to rise from the dead on the day of judgment. Muslims believe that Muhammad never willfully sinned, but he did make unintentional mistakes. And the Quran teaches that Muhammad was God's messenger, but not the savior or the Messiah. The population of Islam, Christianity is 2.38 billion estimated people. Islam is almost 2 billion followers, making it the world's second largest religion, and they are trying to take over the United States right now actively. This is...
I gotta laugh. Like, Isaiah, who stormed the Capitol building on January 6th? They weren't holding Qurans. They weren't waving ISIS flags. They were waving Christian flags. They were praying to Jesus, and they were waving, and they were bringing Bibles. Like, this is what I hear this all the time from people. I argue with them about this. I'm like, I need evidence. You have to give me the evidence that you think that there's some kind of radical takeover of whatever you think Islam is. Because I'll tell you what, if you look around, it's Christian extremism. It's Christian supremacists who are the ones doing the taking over in America. Jesus. Yep. Sorry, it's just wild to me.
No. Like, just random thing. This is a fact. They are trying to take over the United States. Their doctrine is they believe in Allah, which he's one eternal creator and sovereign God. This is not the same God that we worship. This is a false God that they've created, who they call Allah. They also believe in angels. They also believe in the prophets. They believe that Jesus was just another prophet, but Jesus is not God, was not God, but just another prophet. They have 5.
What was that?
I mean, not just another prophet. I mean, he was a Messiah sent to the children of Israel. He's considered a beloved of God. Islam makes no distinction in the truthfulness of prophets. We believe in all prophets of God. We believe that God sent prophets to all humanity. And that the Prophet Muhammad is called the seal of the prophets, not to mean that he's ended prophethood, period. He's ended law-bearing prophethood, but that he's a seal, a validator. Like, you see the seal of the president of the United States. That's how you know that it's from the president. Yeah. That with him, the Prophet Muhammad coming, we believe that he validated the truth of Jesus Christ and of Moses and of Buddha and of Krishna and Confucius, because we don't think that God just spoke to one people. We think that God spoke to all humanity in their time and place. And the only distinction that the Prophet Muhammad brought was not that he was suddenly magically more truthful or less truthful, but in that he validated that, yes, all these messages are from the same God, which is the unifying message that all religions have, is that God is one and that our obligation is to serve humanity indiscriminately. Yep. That's the unifying message, and that's what we should continue to focus on. So for him to say that we consider Jesus as like just another prophet, it's kind of dismissive to Jesus Christ, because he's considered a beloved of God. Muslims name their children Isa, which is Arabic for Jesus. Like, we may name our daughters Maryam, which is Arabic for Mary. We don't do this because of fashion. We do it because of the deep love and sincerity that we have for these noble people of God.
Good to know.
Pillars. Their first pillar is the testimony of faith, the Shahada. That is, they basically recite this thing to convert to Islam. You state a creed, and that creed is that Muslims believe in Allah alone as deity. Their second pillar is prayer. There's 5 rituals of prayer that must be performed every single day, which is why you'll see them get on their mats and different things like that. Their third pillar is giving. The almsgiving is a certain percentage of given once a year. You give a certain percentage of your income. Their fourth tenet is fasting. Muslims fast during Ramadan in the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. They must not eat or drink from dawn until sunset. And then their fifth pillar is pilgrimage, which is physically and financially, if possible. A Muslim must take the pilgrimage to Mecca and Saudi Arabia at least once. The Hajj is performed in the 12th month of the Islamic calendar. Muslims...
Pause for a second there. Yeah. Giving credit where due, that was all accurate. So I'm glad he read Wikipedia accurate.
Yeah, right. And by the way, I mean, there's a lot of overlap between that and what I grew up believing around fasting and giving, etc. I mean, there was no pilgrimage for me in my tradition, but in Catholicism, for sure, there definitely are people who will make pilgrimages to certain holy sites for sure. So it's just interesting to see the similarities,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the one nuance I'll make to what he said is the pillar of zakat, what he calls charity. It's actually a little bit different. Charity and zakat are different. Charity is obligatory on every person to give. in whatever capacity. Zakat is actually a tax on the wealthy who are hoarding wealth and have unused wealth. It's part of the economic system of Islam to prevent the massive hoarding and concentration of wealth. And so if you're wealthy and you have $1 billion just sitting there, Zakat would tax that $1 billion unless you spend it in the economy to keep it going. So it's to prevent stagnation of the economy, stagnation of wealth.
That echoes James 5 when the author writes, woe to you rich business owners who are exploiting your workers for unfair profits. Yes. You're hoarding up wealth like cattle for the day of slaughter, right? Like there's that same theme all throughout the scriptures or throughout the Bible. So again, it's interesting to see the overlap that I was never taught existed in my tradition.
That paradise can be earned through keeping the 5 pillars. The Bible, in contrast, reveals that sinful man will never measure up to a holy God, and it's only by the grace of God and the work that Jesus did on the cross to be saved. So Islam, Muslims do.
Well, actually, let him finish this point because it might be related to what I'm about to say.
Not believe anything that Christians believe. They basically believe a lot of stuff anti the Bible, and not only that, they have a lot of dangerous teachings.
Okay, we'll stop for a second. So, I mean, we just got done talking about how much similarities there are. So I don't know how he could recite the 5 pillars and then you as a Christian are like, yeah, actually a lot of that makes sense to us as well. And then say that. I do want to talk about salvation in Islam because this is important because I would argue that it's actually Islam that is the only religion that you're saved by grace. In Christianity, you're saved ultimately by accepting the blood of Christ. And depending on which Christian you speak to, I've spoken to folks who are on both sides of the aisle. I'm not sure what side of the aisle you're on this one. I would love to hear your feedback. But some Christians say, well, if you don't accept the blood of Christ, it's eternal damnation. Others say, no, you can still get to paradise. My point is that from an Islamic perspective, the good works that we do are for our own soul, but we are not saved by works alone. Ultimately, it is by the grace of God that we are saved. Islam rejects the concept of eternal damnation because it rejects the idea that God's anger and wrath exceeds his mercy and compassion. The Quran calls God the great, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, that he's the gracious, the merciful. And that's important because ultimately we are flawed beings. We're not born sinful, but we commit sin. And God, in his infinite wisdom and mercy and perfect justice, will forgive that sin. 1, by mercy, by us asking for it, and 2, by grace, even if we don't ask for it. So ultimately, every person will attain paradise through God's grace. And I want to make that explicitly clear because in Islam, we're not taught that God is this vengeful, wrathful God that, commands some kind of a sacrifice, that God himself, by being gracious and merciful, and yes, just, where we will be held accountable, but ultimately that justice is not an eternal damnation. It's actually a sense of purification, a removal of sin, at which point then God does admit us into paradise due to his grace and mercy. So it's an important distinction to make because it's often conflated, but in actuality, this element of forgiveness and grace in Islam is so powerful that God says that he loves to forgive and that his grace ultimately exceeds all of his other attributes.
And this is a universal thing for all of humanity, despite being Islam or not, or I'm sorry, Muslim or not?
Exactly right. Even if someone is an atheist and ultimately actively denies God's existence, the grace and mercy of God ultimately transcends the wrath.
Yeah.
Hell is described as a hospital. And you go to a hospital when you have a cancer or when you have an injury, and it's painful. The chemotherapy, the radiation therapy, the physical therapy is painful, but it's a necessary evil to be able to live a healthy life again. In that same way, hell is not a place of eternal torment. It's a place of purging of sin. Once it is purged through God's grace and mercy, a person then is admitted to paradise.
Okay, so let me break this down then briefly for you on the other side. So Isaiah is definitely in a Christian room that believes in eternal damnation. So Isaiah and many evangelicals like him are going to believe that if you don't get saved, and that dies to death by 1,000 qualifications, but for sake of terminology, we'll just use that. Sure. If you don't get saved, if you don't receive the grace of God, you will burn in hell forever because of your sins, right? That's what they believe. However, in the Christian tradition, there are really 3 different views of the afterlife. There is universal reconciliation, there's annihilationism, and then there is what's called eternal conscious torment. That's what Isaiah believes. And it sounds like, based on what I heard you say, it would fall more in line with the idea of universal reconciliation, and the fires of hell, so to speak, are like a refiner's fire, a purifying fire, where all of the bad things we did are burned off. Yes, it's painful, but it's like a necessary thing to go through in order to be able to enter into, people call it heaven, but really I would argue scripturally, it's about having a new earth. What does the new earth look like where all things are reconciled to themselves? Even conservative scholars will tell you that the New Testament authors are not concerned about heaven more than they're concerned about life after life. The idea of like what happens when everything is remade. So yeah, I mean, again, this is a compatible, what you just said is a compatible idea with some rooms of the Christian tradition. However, we're in the room right now of Christian supremacist fundamentalism that would say, no, that's not the case. Only those who become like us and absorb our beliefs the right way are going to enter heaven one day. Everyone else will suffer in the flames of hell. That's how it breaks down.
There's actually a verse in the Quran. I can't remember the exact chapter in front of me right now, but the verse says that, and say to those who believe that heaven is exclusive to them, exclusive to all others, tell them that they should then wish for death if they think they are truthful, but they will never do so because they know that they are lying internally. And so, God is telling us that our own nature tells us that this is a repulsive belief, that God could, love some of his children, but not other children. What kind of a parent loves only one of his children and not the other? I mean, if a parent couldn't do that, how could God, with infinite grace and knowledge and mercy, suddenly excise a portion of his creation for eternal damnation? It doesn't make any sense at all.
Anyone who is deconstructing or who has deconstructed watching this video has asked the same exact question, right? I have 2 kids. If I abused one and loved the other, I'm still a shitty parent. The math ain't mathing, right? So this was one of the big threads that a lot of us pulled that led us kind of out of that basement of fundamentalism that I would argue Isaiah is in, and into the house of Christian thought, realizing, thank God, there are other Christian traditions that actually are much more, loving and make more sense out of this idea than just, well, God loves some and hates others. It makes, which I think does not add up long term. All right, let's keep it going.
Kill the unbeliever, like stone the woman that commits adultery. That's Sharia law, which is very, very violent. Let's just look at a few clips here. This is one of...
I'm telling you, man, I told you before we started recording, we could stop every sentence and unpack the BS this guy is spouting.
Yeah, none of that is true. I've written on Islamic Sharia on my blog Islam Today. The key principle is separation of religion and state here. And so whenever you think of Islamic Sharia, and I'm sure whatever this guy thinks is wrong, it mandates separation of religion and state. And how do we know this, that it mandates secular governance? Because when you heard me mention earlier the Constitution of Medina, the prophet was already a prophet. He already claimed prophethood. We had the Quran. It wasn't complete yet, but it was being revealed. Islamic Sharia was being revealed. If the purpose of Islam was to enforce religious theocracy, he would have been the one to do it. But he never did in his entire life. He never allowed it in any capacity. He made sure that Jewish people and Christians and non-believers, non-monotheistic believers could live and worship as they wanted. And so this idea that enforcing Sharia is what we're trying to do, it's nonsensical. It doesn't make there's no historical precedent for it. There's no scriptural precedent for it. But then to go into stuff like, forcing women to dress or stoning for adulterers, he's actually describing the Old Testament. The Quran has no such prescription of that. In fact, the Quranic teaching specifically forbids these punishments altogether.
Well, can I ask you a question about that while we're on that topic? Yeah, obviously, there are countries around the world that I'm under the impression are either Muslim majority or that they're ruled by some kind of theocratic ideal that is based in Islam. And there are, issues with human rights and women's rights, etc. So like, look, I would say that every religious tradition has extremism in it. And my tradition, as we know, is not exempt from that. Would you say it's the same thing when it comes to Islam, or like how do you think about those things, regarding that stuff?
This is such a great question, Tim. I'm so glad you asked it, because I know your viewers are thinking about the same thing too. Right. We see the theocracies of Iran, of Saudi Arabia, the quasi-theocracies of Pakistan, and we see the overall horror and destruction that these theocracies cause. This is why Islam adamantly rejects them. But we also recognize that these are recent developments in the history of the world, right? You don't see ancient theocracies in this respect. You don't see this counter pluralism narrative that we're seeing in these Muslim majority countries today. And we can talk about what led to the development of those. It's a combination of corrupt evangelicals gaining power through political persuasion and wealthy donors. Sound familiar to what's happening in the United States? And it's also a fusion of like Western interventionism, right? I don't want to pretend it's one or the other. So it's a fusion of both. But what we have to look at when we're trying to understand what Islam actually teaches is look at the example of the Prophet, look at what the Quran actually says, and look at what happened in the centuries after the Prophet died. What you saw was an expansion of science, of arts, of literature, of music. You're a musician, like Muslims were among the first to invent the guitar. Muslims were the ones who popularized the miswak, the toothbrush. 90 years before Edward Jenner, Muslims were inoculating and using vaccines, algebra, coffee, for God's sake. It all came from Muslims.
Thank you for that contribution, yes. Because God, do I love coffee. Holy moly.
You want to talk about science, Hisham ibn Haytham is the father of the scientific method that every scientist uses today. Abbas ibn Firnas invented the flying machine 900 years before the Wright brothers. Aventia was a scholar of astronomy and mathematics and sciences. The golden age of Islam for 700 years, Moorish Spain. There's a scholar, Gwendolyn Midlow Hall, who talks about the Moors had a prosperous society that was intersectional with Jews and Christians who held high and prominent positions in the government. And she says, this is a funny thing, she goes, they were heavily criticized because they were too influenced by their women. This is what they were mocked for, that, you guys call yourself men, you listen to your women too much, you can't be a real man. And these Moors said, no, this is how you have a functioning society, by making sure women have an equal and adequate role in society. And so I would encourage folks to look at the 1,000 years history prior to this modern day degradation, and look at that 1,000-year history of progress, of scientific, of pluralistic, of educational, of gender, of interracial harmony, interfaith harmony, progress that existed. That's the rule. This is what we're seeing as the exception, and it should be condemned I'm not going to make any excuses for these modern day regimes. You will never hear me defend them. But I would ask you, if you're talking about Islam itself, look at the history that we have for a millennia, not this injustice that we have for a century.
Fair. I appreciate you kind of breaking that down, and maybe I'll bring you back for a different episode where we can go into a deeper dive on that topic in particular. Okay, well, hey, good news. We are 5 minutes in, and we're like an hour into the video, so I'll keep it rolling.
Amazing.
How they took over the UK. And this is scary, what I'm about to show you,
this video
because this is what they are doing right now in the United States, especially through this new mayor they're trying to do through New York, bringing in a bunch of Muslims and all that, which that guy's getting shut down real quick. But let's just watch this video here.
London is Muslim. The mayor of Birmingham is a Muslim.
This is the UK.
The mayor of Leeds is Muslim. The mayor of Blackburn is Muslim. The mayor of Sheffield is Muslim. The mayor of Oxford is a Muslim. The mayor of Luton is a Muslim. The mayor of Oldham is a Muslim. The mayor of Rochdale is a Muslim. All of this was achieved by only 4 million Muslims out of
I'm going to pause here because I did see this part of the video ahead of time. I did some digging on the UK and how it operates. First off, this is such a disingenuous take because we think about a mayor in the U.S., we think, oh, that's someone in charge of a city like Mamdani or someone in charge of a town. That's not how it works in the U.K. There are different tiers of essentially mayors, and there are very few mayors that have like real power. There's like some like the mayor over London, for example, but most mayors are elected by their local councils. They serve for 1 year, and they have no major influence, okay? And so this video making it seem like all these people who are Muslim are somehow taking over the UK isn't the case at all. The majority of these people cited have 1 year cycles, and then they get voted out, and the council brings someone else in, and all they're there to do is to really just offer maybe advice. They have no actual legal permission to like shape policy. So I just think right away we have to be really clear about this, because if I didn't know any better, I would think, oh my gosh, there's so many Islamic mayors in the UK. Isaiah is right, it's a takeover. No, that's not what's happening at all.
Well said. I'll also add that Sadiq Khan's been reelected to a third term. Muslims are not the majority of London. If he was that problematic, I assure you Londoners would have voted him out after the first one, but they reelected him twice. Also, when you look at, they listed off 5 or 10, maybe 15 Muslim mayors. There's more than 6,100 cities and villages in the UK. So, okay, great. You mentioned 20. What does that actually mean? How is that an invasion? Help me understand the math here. The math ain't mathing.
So, friends, my source for this is fullfact.org. I'm going to read this verbatim just so you have a really clear image here of how ridiculous this is. Broadly, there are two different types of mayors in England and Wales, elected and civic. If you include them both, all these places have had a Muslim mayor. That's what this video cited, but they don't all currently have one. Directly elected mayors, introduced in Local Government Act of 2000, are elected by the people and have overall responsibility for running of local services. At the moment, there are about 16 local authorities with directly elected mayors and 7 directly elected metro mayors, including the mayor of London. Civic mayors perform ceremonial duties and chair the local council, but unlike directly elected mayors, they do not make decisions about the council business. So there's a huge difference here, okay? Huge difference. And by the way, those civic mayors are not elected. The council brings them on, like I said earlier. So right away, fact number 1, so to speak, has been debunked. Let's go to the next one.
66 million people in England. Today in England, there are over 3,000
And this is what they're trying to do to the U.S. Same way they took over the UK, they're trying to take over the U.S.
mosques. There are over 100.
Okay, I want to pause here. That's not true either. The closest data we have on this, and it's hard to know, is estimates put it at about 1,800 mosques, maybe. And again, that's compared to 41,000 churches in the UK. And also, who cares, right? If we support religious freedom, if we support the idea that all men, right? All people are created equal and that they're given these rights endowed by their creator, then they should have the right to worship freely. I don't care if there's 15,000 mosques in the UK, right? So I don't want people to think that oh, it's not a big deal because there's less of these things. That isn't my only point. I don't care if there were more. If there were more mosques than there were churches. Muslims have a right to worship how they please, just like how I have that right. Isaiah has that right. So as long you're not infringing on someone else's right to worship as well. This is not a scary thing at all.
10 for 10, no notes. Yeah,
Great. All right. 130 Sharia courts. Oh, hold on.
Sharia courts in England, and there are more than 50 Sharia councils.
Okay, help me understand this. I'll be clear. I'll be honest with you. My understanding of Sharia law is like, Iran. It's something that's just like militant and oppresses people and will chop off your hand if you steal. What is Sharia law and what is this person talking about?
Islamic Sharia is the personal moral guide that Muslims have. It defines how we worship, how we practice hygiene, our marital laws. By the way, Islam banned child marriage 1,400 years ago. Our inheritance, our economic obligations, everything that he talked about in the 5 pillars, it defines that. What these courts are talking about is no different than halakha or canon law. Halakha for Jews or canon law for Catholics, where faith organizations are allowed to have in the UK and here in the US, internal arbitration courts to determine issues, within a church or within a synagogue. If there's a marital dispute and they don't want it to, go to the courts, then they have the permission to resolve it internally without bringing in expensive lawyers. That's all this is. It's nothing,
Totally.
And here in the United States, there was a recent hit piece written on Muslims. I studied that, published a response to it about 150 cases of Sharia law in American courts, and I looked it up, and all it was a mosque decided that they were not going to rehire an imam, and the imam filed a lawsuit against the mosque, and the court said, "This is actually not our dispute. This is your own internal contractual matter. There was no discrimination. It was a contract disagreement. You guys figure it out."
Right.
They're calling that Sharia law in America. Like, no, I'm sorry. That's just a basic employment and labor situation.
Yep.
And that's what these courts are talking about. It's rather than getting expensive lawyers involved on minor issues. Now, to be very clear, what we're talking about are civic matters. We're not talking about criminal matters. If there's a criminal matter, a case of, God forbid, abuse or theft or robbery, absolutely we need to have the secular courts manage that. And then finally, the point I'll make is when you look at what's happening in Iran or Saudi or Pakistan, this is not Islamic Sharia. Because at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier on, there is no concept of theocracy in Islam. You need separation of religion and state, where people can worship or not worship as they please without government intervention.
Yeah, really helpful. And by the way, my fact-checking website says that roughly they think that there are maybe around 30 major Sharia councils, not several hundred like he says. And to your point, they can't overrule national law, right? It's for internal. Look, to put it in Christian language, the Apostle Paul tells the church not to sue each other in court because you'll look bad to the world. He says, handle it internally. It's the same concept, friends, okay? We've been brainwashed by Western media, especially right-wing conservative media, to hear the word Sharia and have this image in our head that, as Qasim was explaining, is just not the full story. Or, scratch that. It's not true at all, to be clear.
Yeah.
So,
well, and also, I'll just add, Sharia means law. So when someone says Sharia law, they're saying law. It's like saying chai tea or bread roti. Like, it's just the same word twice. It's Islamic Sharia is what you want to actually say.
Islamic Sharia, thank you.
78% of Muslim women do not work and receive state support and free accommodation.
That's not true.
63%.
That's not true. I'll break this down in a second.
Of Muslims do not work and receive state support and free housing.
Okay, so according to, again, fullfact.org, the claim is 78% of Muslim women don't work and are on free benefits housing. And again, the point of this, Isaiah is showing people this to make his audience think that these Muslims are just a bunch of freeloaders and that white people in Europe are paying, right, for them to be there for free while they just sit around and do nothing. That's why he's doing this. He's trying to disparage Muslims. That being said, according to fullfact.org, roughly, let's see, we're not aware of any figures on benefits and housing by religion. 16% of Muslim women are unemployed, while a further 58% are economically inactive. Compared to, generally speaking, 5% of women in the UK were unemployed, 42% were economically inactive. By the way, let me just say, in this guy's tradition, that's actually a good thing, because he believes that women should be at home raising children. So I'm not sure if that's a value in Islam. Maybe it is, and great if they're able to survive off of a one-income family and raise children and do things, according to Isaiah, the right way. I'm not sure why he would disparage that. Regarding men, the claim is that 63% of Muslim men don't work and are on free benefits and housing. That's incorrect. 11% of Muslim men are unemployed, while a further 24% are economically inactive, using 2015 figures, so over 11 years ago. At the same time, about 6% of men in the UK were unemployed and 31%, 7% higher, economically inactive. So again, this is just not a true statement. It kind of is embarrassing for Isaiah to claim to stand on truth and to be a truth teller, and and that data and facts matter to him. And then he just shares what looks like an AI video of absolute Islamophobic slop. It just shows how untrustworthy these kinds of people are, because they're not interested in telling their truth. They're committed to their dogma, right? They're committed to dogma over anything else. So Isaiah has to squeeze his version of events into this little hole that says Islam is bad and trying to invade America, even though if you look around, it's the white Christian nationalists that currently sit in our government. It's Paula White who has an office in the White House, not Zoran Mamdani. So it's just wild to witness.
I'll add to your really eloquent thoughts, Tim, is from an economic perspective, Islam requires the husband in a marriage to be able to financially provide for the entire family. Islam certainly has no objection to women working, but does not oblige women to work. And if a woman does work, she owns 100% of what she earns. Even if she earns more than her husband, she maintains 100% ownership over her income, 50% of his, but has equal say over her husband's income. So there's an economic kind of skewing against men in favor of women. And so even if that data point that he made up was true, right, it would simply attest to the fact that women don't feel like they need to work because their husbands are able to provide for them. And if they're able to provide for themselves, their husbands get no say over their income either.
Well said.
State-supported Muslim families have an average of 6 to 8 children.
Also not true. According to the data, it's 2.3 compared to like 1.8 of the general population. So not much higher at all.
Receive free accommodation. Every school in the UK is required to teach about Islam.
That's crazy.
Why is that crazy? That's a typical world religions class. Don't you want people to know about how the world operates? Like, why is that crazy?
Like, they also teach about Christianity and Judaism and Hinduism. Like, this is not like a magical Islamic Sharia class. Like, what is happening?
Right. And to be clear, unlike what happened in Oklahoma, right, where they want kids to not just learn about the Bible or Christianity, but to essentially be indoctrinated into Christian nationalist ideology, right? This is not what we're talking about here. The UK is not like, you know what we got to do? We got to convince kids who aren't Muslim to become Muslim, and we're going to do it by teaching them about the Quran in the schools. But the way Isaiah frames this, that's crazy. Dude, do you hear yourself?
Wow.
It's so anti-intellectual. Like, don't you want your kids to know about how the world operates beyond your little dogmatic fundamentalist bubble? Wow. Telling on yourself here, bro. Big time.
The one most common baby name in England is Muhammad.
That's not true.
This is not immigration.
I looked it up. It's not true. It's like David or something.
This is invasion.
This is not immigration.
Who is, by the way, David is also a beloved prophet in Islam as well. Just throwing that out there.
Thanks for letting us know. I'm going to back this up so you can hear what he says here. It's so
absurd.
Is required to teach about Islam.
That's crazy.
Number one most common baby name in England is Muhammad. This is not immigration. This is invasion.
This is not immigration. It's invasion. That is exactly what's happening. We cannot let this happen in the U.S.
What is this dude talking? I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for this, bro. He walks around thinking this. It's crazy.
Yeah.
This is a barbaric religion. It teaches barbaric things, and there's no place for it. And I'm telling you right now,
this is coming from the dude who is part of a tradition with folks like Mark Driscoll, who say that women are penis homes. Or Doug Wilson, who says that women shouldn't have the right to vote in America. Like, this is what's so interesting to me. He's part of a tradition that is actively working to remove the rights of people that he thinks are quote unquote woke or demonically influenced. Like, this guy thinks that being gay is from a demonic spirit. But somehow, Islam is the barbaric religion. Like, do you hear yourself?
I wonder what it's like to walk around to be in constant fear of the other on something that you've never actually engaged with or had a conversation with. I've gone to like the reddest parts of the country and had conversations on Islam. And the number one comment I get from folks is, we were never taught any of this. We were just taught to fear. I had no idea how much we have in common. And I've had, Christian friends who are deep and close, dear Christian pastor friends now, who talk about how this has strengthened their faith as Christians because now they feel more alignment between Jesus' message of loving their neighbor and them being able to love Muslims as their neighbors, even from a different faith perspective. Like, that's a powerful thing that they're denying themselves by living in fear.
100%.
The Quran was written by demons, literally.
Jesus.
He was visited by demons that gave him the insight. All right, this is what just happened in New York. This is terrifying, if you ask me. Guys, all those Christians that are being murdered and beheaded and tortured and burned in Africa right now that we've been covering, and the president finally spoke out about it. Yeah, that's happening because of Muslims. Islamic extremists who are just going by the book, the Quran, are murdering Christians by the masses.
Go ahead.
So this is an important point to bring up here because I have friends in Nigeria. I have friends who are aware of the on-the-ground realities. And what Nigerians themselves will tell you is that this is not a religious war, that this is political extremism that is run amok, and they are targeting Muslims and Christians the same. In fact, more Muslims have been killed than have Christians. And this is not a contest of who has it worse. But I'm trying to point out that this is not a religious war. And to try to frame it as that is a deeply unserious and devastating analysis because you're not actually getting to the root cause of the issue. All you're doing is creating more hatred and more fear and more discord. Every single loss of life is horrifying. And in this situation, it's important to recognize that the loss of life that's happening is not because of some like religious crusade. It's because of political corruption. That's fundamentally it. And I'm willing to bet, and you can keep me honest about this, I'm willing to bet that this guy had no problem with the Arab Christians who were killed in a genocide by the Israeli government. I'm willing to bet he's never once spoken out. If he has, I will eat my words. But this is my point, that if he truly did care about Christians being brutally massacred and murdered, that's happening right now with Arab Christians in Palestine. It happened, by the way, after the invasion of Iraq. The Christian community in Iraq was devastated and decimated after the US-led invasion. People don't realize that since that invasion, of an actual invasion of Iraq, according to Brown University, between 4.5 and 4.7 million civilians in the region were murdered by Western bombs and Western wars through an actual invasion. For him to be silent on that, when George Bush said, this is a crusade that God told me to wage, but then to pretend an actual political and military strife is somehow a religious war, it's the height of hypocrisy. It's deadly. Innocent people are dying because of the hypocrisy of people like this man over here.
I can't express to you enough, looking back on the war on terror, quote unquote, in my tradition, how much it was wrapped in Christian language. This is a battle against good versus evil. God's on our side. It was exactly what Isaiah is saying, that but only we were the ones doing the killing. I mean, it is unbelievable to witness when you're outside the bubble how obvious that was back then and how people inside the bubble just don't see it.
Christians. That's what this religion teaches. This was at Times Square here, right before the mayor got elected, who's Muslim. How ironic is this? Islamic extremists blew the Twin Towers up, and now the mayor of New York is a Muslim. You can't make this stuff up.
It's really wild to me to witness someone who will give nuance to his own tradition, right? If we talk about how white Christian supremacists were the ones who created Jim Crow laws, how they were the ones on the favor of segregation. More recently, we can give examples of the Capitol building being stormed, et cetera. He would say, well, I disagree with those Christians, or maybe they weren't even true Christians, or they weren't being biblical. So he can give nuance here. But when it comes to what happened on 9/11, suddenly every Muslim on the planet, including Mamdani, is somehow responsible for the actions of those few people. It's really wild to witness like the hypocritical approach where he can give himself excuses why when Christians do bad things, hey, you know what, they're not true Christians. Right? But when it's maybe other people motivated potentially by a different faith or just in general to do bad things, suddenly that's everyone who is part of that faith is now on the hook for the actions of what those men did. It's unreal.
I'm gonna read a quote to you, Tim, and I want you to guess who said this quote.
I'm ready.
This person said that our movement is Christian. We tolerate no one in our ranks who attacks the ideas of Christianity. Who said that?
I don't know. I give up.
That was Adolf Hitler. And it's a verified quote. You can look it up. And so if this guy wants to hold Muslims accountable, Zoran Mamdani, who was 9 years old when 9/11 happened, accountable for the horrific murder of 3,000 innocent people, then are we holding Isaiah accountable for the mass genocide of 6 million Jewish people and disabled people and gay people and Romas? I mean, is that the argument that he's making?
Right.
If Mamdani can be accountable for 9/11, then certainly this guy is accountable for the Holocaust according to his own bizarre definition. I mean, that's how offensive it is. There's a great article written by a phenomenal journalist in Christianity Today that looks at the KKK. Mm-hmm. And it quotes the KKK of Virginia to say, we are a Christian organization. We find it offensive to call us a hate group while they're wearing their hoods.
I know.
And so this is the problem with the world today, that you have these propagandists like this guy Isaiah, who wants to judge every religion by its worst adherents rather than recognizing the humanity of people or of a faith by its best practitioners. And that's what we should be focused on instead.
The irony is that 1 Corinthians 5, the Apostle Paul is very clear that Christians are to judge those with inside the church, and that it's God's job to judge those outside the church. It's a clear command. And it's really fascinating watching evangelicalism do the complete opposite. They spend all of their time, all of their energy critiquing everyone outside of their bubble while giving absolutely no accountability to the Christians doing things in the name of their Jesus, right, that are horrific and terrible. Those are excused. They're not real Christians. It's explained away. But hey, Mamdani, that's the problem with America.
Yep.
That's New York. What is happening? You guys have forgotten what you guys have forgotten. Look at this.
Fighting. We're done. We're done being tortured.
This is Times Square. Look at this.
And hurt and judged. This is the correct religion. This is the religion that all of humanity needs to be upon.
I rebuke you, demonic spirit, in Jesus' name.
Of Islam, and we will not stop until it enters every home. So I want you to
we will not stop until it enters every home. I rebuke you in Jesus' name.
repeat after me. I want to hear it in every single district. It should tremble. Brooklyn should hear it. The Bronx should hear it.
This is America, guys. How crazy is
Should
this?
hear it. Say it as if the Ummah depends on this, my brothers and sisters. La ilaha illallah. Muhammad
This is like the chants they do before they murder Christians and terrorize villages.
Rasulullah. There is no God worthy of worship except Allah, the God of Jesus, the God of Moses, the God of Abraham, and the God of the last and final.
So demonic. Let me show you how demonic.
Okay, can you, first off, before I give comment, do you know who this person is or what's going on here? Like, can you give us some context or not really?
I have no idea who this person is. As I'm watching what he's saying, he's exercising his religious freedom in the First Amendment, protecting the United States. It's, to me, no different than a Christian praising Jesus in public and saying that Christianity is the one true religion. I mean, I think that's kind of the point, of our founding documents, to protect religious freedom and to let people believe, or, you know, the statute of religious freedom in Virginia was established for this very purpose, to allow people to worship or not worship as they please without oppression. So I'm not sure what's offensive about this.
Well, what's offensive is that for a Christian supremacist, America can't give equal opportunity to people of different faiths to exercise their First Amendment right. Sean Foyt, the worship leader, can tour the world or tour America during COVID, say faith over fear, we're not wearing a mask. He can sing worship songs inside of the Capitol building, declaring it as an act of warfare against the enemy. He can do that, no problem. But this person exercising his First Amendment right peacefully is suddenly, can you believe this is America? Yes, Isaiah, I can. I can believe this is America. This is what the First Amendment looks like when other people who you might disagree with get access to the same rights that you have, right? Isaiah is never going to do a video on the hate preachers. He's never going to do a video on the people who call gay folks the F word, who tell women that they're whores who have to repent. He'll never cite that video as a case of Christian extremism trying to take over America, but he'll cite this person as an example of, look, we're being taken over by Muslims. It is so clear to me, the more I do this work, how absolutely one-sided, how blind they are to their own radical extremism, and they're essentially projecting it onto other groups of people who are actually in the minority, right? Muslims, I think, just hit 2% of the U.S. population. Congratulations, guys, you're 2%. And you would think, by the way, Isaiah talks about this, like somehow this is like a 95% Muslim majority country of all radicals, by the way, of course, who are just trying to persecute Christians. In reality, it's the opposite. It's the Christian evangelicals who have the $1 billion war chest. They have groups like the ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, that are advocating the erosion of civil and religious rights of other people groups all the time, right? It is Christians who are in the government. It is Christian extremists who are close to Trump. That's who runs the government right now, friends. It's not Muslims. And even if it was, so what? It's wild to me. Well, I can rant on this all day. I mean, it just gets me so fired up.
You're right. You're exactly right.
Well, if you like my rant, friends, give this video a like. Let's keep going.
This is a mosque in the UK, in Birmingham, and the preacher is describing how to, you'll see.
That she is punished and she is stoned to death.
Basically had to stone to death a woman.
And according to the Sharia again, when it comes to women, there must be a hole dug in the earth, in the ground.
He's teaching what the Quran says about women.
A video has surfaced from a Birmingham mosque where a preacher gave a sermon.
What's up?
Well, let's finish the sermon, because obviously there's nothing in the Quran that says that at all. So I don't know what Isaiah's talking about, but I want to see what this hate preacher is saying as well.
Cool.
That's now under serious scrutiny. In it, he describes in graphic detail a form of punishment for women that involves stoning. He claims this practice is part of religious law and even explains how a woman should be buried halfway before it begins. This isn't a translation issue. It's not taken out of context. It's a direct statement and people are outraged. Let's be clear, promoting violence of any kind is not just wrong. It's unlawful and and completely against the values of dignity, safety and equality in the UK. This isn't about targeting a religion, it's about upholding human rights. No belief system gives anyone a pass to encourage harm. And when it happens publicly, accountability is essential. Authorities are now being urged to investigate. The mosque involved must speak up, and as a society, we need to be united. There is no space for this kind of rhetoric.
No space.
Watch this clip closely.
You know what's crazy is you have a bunch of people on the left that are super woke that are like.
So he changes it here. So yeah. So why don't you do? Yeah. Do you want to speak? You call that person a hate preacher? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I object to someone like Isaiah elevating that guy as someone who's representative of anything. The guy's a hate preacher. And, you know, again, notice the language that's being used here. Like, this is not out of context. It's straight from, you know, well, from what? From the guy's mouth?
Right.
He's not quoting the Quran. He's not quoting the Hadith, the sayings of the Prophet. He's not quoting any example from the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He's simply making it up on his own as he goes along. And this is why it's important that we have criminal laws. So when sociopaths like that hate preacher preach hate, they're held accountable. I don't know if Isaiah thought someone like me would be like, whoa, what you have to understand. No, you don't abuse women. You know, chapter 4, verse 20 of the Quran says, inherit not women against their will. Like, it's the most explicitly clear language that you cannot force anything on women. And you know, the wife of Prophet Muhammad, Aisha, very famously said that the Prophet never raised his hand to hit a woman. I mean, his own wife is attesting to this. And so we have example after example. The Prophet himself said that he who harms his wife is not the best of men, or he who hits a woman shall find his seat in the hellfire. I mean, in the most like staunch words, condemned domestic violence and abuse of women. In his dying words at his farewell sermon, he said, women are your committed partners. He didn't say your servants or subservient to you or your slaves. He said, women are your committed partners. In fact, even from the Quran, when God talks about the creation of man, he doesn't say that woman is created from a rib of Adam. God says that man and woman were created as equal beings from the same soul. And so from the very inception of the creation of men and women, this idea of equality and partnership is there. And so whatever this, you know, sociopathic hate preacher is saying, I don't know, because we don't have the full video and Isaiah doesn't offer it to us. But for Isaiah to elevate that guy as somehow representative of Islam, but then ignore people like, you know, Mark Driscoll and other hate preachers that we see.
Stephen Anderson, Westboro Baptist Church. Man, I could be here. I could go off on and on and on.
This is disingenuous. And so the rubric has to be the actual source material, which in Islam is the Quran, then the Prophet, peace be upon him, and then the sayings and the companions. None of that is being cited in any of this, by the way. He hasn't cited a single verse at any point in this entire video. It's important to note that.
I mean, look, John MacArthur, who was a very well-known Protestant evangelical preacher in the Calvinist tradition, famously said that all women are subservient to men. You know, like, this is the idea that women submit to men is a very common Christian, evangelical Christian ideal. Many people, even so, the term is egalitarian versus complementarian. Isaiah would say women should be able to preach, they should be able to lead, but even in Pentecostal spaces like Isaiah's, they're still very much men dominant, and there is still a notion that, well, especially in the household, men lead and women follow. So again, it's just so interesting hearing him talk or elevate this, like you said, this hate preacher's voice, trying to make it seem like, well, look how bad this whole religion is. Meanwhile, he minimizes the actual hate and quite frankly, the tolerated and accepted belief by many people like him that women ultimately are inferior to men and should submit to men's leadership. So it's just, I mean, R.J. Rushdoony, the man who I would argue was really about the first architect of Christian nationalism as we know it today, back in the 60s, said that gay people should be stoned to death. I mean, this is I say this, friends, because all of us can find extremism in any religious tradition, period. And I'm just trying to make the point that Christians are not exempt from that. Isaiah thinks his shit don't stink. That's the problem here. He's not being honest about his own tradition while he's nitpicking on a tradition that he obviously knows so little about. He essentially has it ass backwards, according to the Bible, right? He should be holding his own accountable and letting God judge those outside of the church. Instead, he's ignorantly picking on Islam here and leaving all of the atrocities of his own tradition by the wayside and ignoring it as somehow it's no big deal.
I'll also point out, Tim, and I think you'll agree with this, that patriarchy is a global cancer. 100%. It affects every country of the world.
Yes.
People forget that the United States is among the top 10 consistently ranked most dangerous countries in the world for women. 1 in 3 women here will suffer sexual assault. A poll of Parisian women in Paris, 100% reported suffering sexual harassment in public. 100% reported that. It's insane to me. According to RAINN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, 98% of men who commit rape in America will never see a day in prison. It's just absurd. And so if the only time you care about women's rights is when women suffer abuse at the hands of Black and brown people, it's not actually women's rights you care about. It's white supremacy that you're protecting.
Yes.
And I think we just need to call it out. I mean, do Muslim men, are there problems of domestic violence in Muslim majority countries? Yes. But it's not because they're Muslim, it's because they're men. And mine are sociopaths.
Right.
We need to do better as
Right, right. What's the common denominator? Men, not not Christianity, not Islam, not Judaism. It's men that are the common denominator. All right, hey, we got 3 minutes left, friends. Let's wrap this thing up. Qasim, thanks for making time. I appreciate you coming on and spending almost 2 hours with me.
Days for Gaza and for Islam. Look at this right here. Look how interesting this is.
So excited about it. People thought when I first asked that I just wanted to read it out of curiosity. I just started reading the Quran and I am so excited about it. People thought when I first asked that I just wanted to read it out of curiosity.
Brother, let me tell you right now, if you went to any of these countries that are under Sharia law, Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, Gaza, they would throw you off of a building. That is literally what the Quran teaches. If you look into Sharia law, they throw gay people off of buildings.
Do you want to respond to that?
So, yeah, I mean, again, this is the classic Isaiah tactic here. It makes an outlandish, barbaric statement. No actual references cited, no actual evidence cited. Just, hey, I said it, so there must be true. No, there's actually no such horrific teaching like that. In fact, there's no such teaching at all to violently persecute or harm gay people. And I'll go even further to say, this is a little-known policy. I'm not sure I entirely agree with it because there's so many other factors involved here. But when you look at Iran, for example, they actually offer government-funded gender-affirming care surgery as well. Again, Iran has a lot of issues. I'm not here to defend them at all, but you don't have that here in the United States at all. Meanwhile, here in the United States, the Equality Act is still not law. So it's perfectly legal to discriminate against somebody because they're gay on a federal level. So, again, we can both acknowledge that gay people suffer discrimination in some Muslim majority nations and also acknowledge that gay people suffer discrimination here in the United States. The unifying factor is intolerant people. It's not a religion or a class or a culture. It's the fact that gay people suffer persecution and discrimination on a global scale. And it's just the height of being disingenuous and dishonest to try to attribute it to one community when in actuality, this is a global cancer that we need to work on combating, the persecution of gay people.
Yeah, no, by the way, you're right. I looked it up. Iran is the only Islamic country where the sex reassignment surgery is recognized. Many European citizens travel to this Middle East country for gender confirmation and reassignment surgery. So, fact check true, right? So again, friends, it's the reason why I do these videos, the reason why I bring people like Qasim on is to educate you, because I don't think we understand how deep the indoctrination can go. And look, no one is, I know Qasim wouldn't say this, I certainly wouldn't say it. It's not about what religion is better than the other. It's just recognizing that it's not nearly as barbaric or terrible as you were taught as a child that this other religion in this case, Islam is, right? And it's really important to recognize that because the world's complicated, the world's big, and people like Isaiah are pushing a narrative out there that only sows more division and more fear, and we have to take the time to unpack it so you're more educated, so you know how to spot it in the future to dismantle it on your own as well.
Exactly right.
Hey, YouTube, don't flag me for saying that. That's what Sharia law teaches. You either execute them, you hang them publicly, or you throw them off the highest building possible. That is what Sharia law teaches. So you're all excited about...
By the way, this is coming from, in America, Candace Owens called trans people demonic. Michael Knowles said we have to eradicate transgenderism. Matt Walsh routinely attacks trans people. And Isaiah is a right-wing person. He probably endorses many of those views. In fact, I would argue, I can look it up while we're watching, that on his demonic deliverance form, having thoughts of being born in the wrong body is probably a demonic oppression thing. So it's the pot calling the kettle black, bro. In his country, if Isaiah was in charge, charge, if his people were in charge, we would be killing trans people. We would be throwing them off of buildings because their narrow, fundamentalist interpretation of the Bible would dictate so. Gosh.
Again, I go back to the source material aspect. There's no example in Islamic history where a gay person was executed. There's no example of them being beheaded, God forbid. And also just think of the stupidity of this idea of throwing them off the tallest building. You're talking about 7th century, 8th century. The tallest building was 20 feet high. What are you going to do? Like, it's such a stupid thing to there's that scene in The Hangover where he says to the Zach Galifianakis character, "You are literally too stupid to insult," and he responds, "Thank you." And I feel like that's what I'm dealing with right now. How do I even begin to explain how dumb of an argument that is? But that's the world we're in right now.
This guy has millions of subscribers. I mean, he has a huge platform.
Wild.
On, but they would actually kill you. That's why the whole gays for Gaza and all these woke people, free Palestine, Gaza, bro, they would kill all of you. All of you that identify as gay, they would kill you. So I don't know why you're supporting them. I
want to read it.
You'd be the first to get killed if you went there.
Study it. I started following somebody on social media that teaches the Quran and hosts a Quran book club for Muslims and non-Muslims. So I'm really excited to start going to that.
I can't watch
She
this.
was describing the chapter of the bee, and that just blew my
Let me just skip because this is making me nauseated.
I've never.
Yeah, because Isaiah is so transphobic, he can't stomach the thought of watching a trans person talk about the Quran. Talk about a double whammy. You know what I mean? Whoa! A demonic religion and a trans person in the same video? I'm nauseous. It's amazing what he finds sick. Right? This is a man who says, pray for Israel. He doesn't find the genocide of the Palestinians gross. He doesn't find Trump saying we have to hang traitors gross. That's fine, right? The Epstein files, I don't think he's covered that at all. Not a problem when it comes to pedophilia in right-wing spaces. But a trans person talking about the Quran on camera, I'm nauseous. I'm sick. I can't watch this. It's so clear. It's so clear. Completely.
He's a drive-in movie theater. This is all projection.
Yeah.
Thought that I believed in God before, and now I'm really having a revolution of self of I think I actually believe in God. If you've been curious, I really recommend it. There are a lot of people who are converting. There's a lot of people who are reading it.
You cannot be gay and Muslim, brother. You are a man.
I'm not saying that I wouldn't. And I don't know.
The irony is just crazy. I'm just going to hold myself back from saying what I want to say. Here's the bottom line, guys. We cannot allow this to happen. We need to pray for a revival in the Muslim community. We need to pray for a revival among all these Muslims that are deceived by this demonic spirit. It's all demonic. It's all witchcraft. That's bottom line. This barbaric religion is demonic. The Quran was written by a demon. You can just literally Google that. With the information I gave you, you just Google and find that information of how Islam started. I want to make this video to shed some light on what's going on. We need to pray. We need to be diligent. We need to be aware. We cannot let this happen. What happened in the UK. This is why I believe Christians need to be in politics. I believe Christians need to be in government because we cannot allow this to take over. Let me know what you guys think about this video.
Christian supremacy at its finest, right? Everything is a war. We're under attack. This other religion is our enemy. These people are built on the idea of warfare. Everything is a war. They're in a war against the Democrats. They're in a war against the socialists, against CRT, against wokeism, against DEI, against the deep state, against the transgender ideology, against the gays. We're at war against the Muslims. They're at war against everyone, dude. This is so common in this basement of evangelical fundamentalism. Everything is a freaking war, and it's based on so much dogma. It's based on so much dogma. Isaiah's response to this, it's not intellectual, right? He's not really examining. He's not bringing on experts. He's just saying it's demonic. So believe me, it's demonic. What does that even mean? How? Where? When? Like, break it down for me, man. He can't. It's just dogma.
It's, well said. And I'll remind folks that fortunately we have such a beautiful history of Muslims and Christians working together for literally thousands of years. Yeah. We have so many examples from the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him himself, where he worked closely with Christians, where he protected Christians, Christians protected him. There was an alliance against injustice. People forget the Holy Sepulchre of Christ, to this day, is under the protection of a Muslim family that makes sure that it is kept clean, that it is kept sacred, that it is kept protected, that it is not harmed. I mean, for over 1,000 years, a Muslim family has protected this holiest spot in Christian history. Do you really think that that would be possible if Islam somehow taught to be anti-Christian? There are churches, hundreds of churches all throughout the Middle East that have been protected by Muslims, if you really thought the goal was to wipe out and eradicate Christianity through violence or force, you really think those churches would still be here? So, we need to look at this with a sense of sobriety and a sense of sincerity and genuinity. There is obviously going to be a push by Christians and Muslims alike to preach their faith, and that should be celebrated and embraced. As long, the Quran says, argue in the way that is best. And the way that is best is one that accounts for people's sensitivities and their feelings and their emotions and recognize the humanity in one another. This is why, and I shared this story recently on my Substack, when Arab Christians from a town called Najran came to the Prophet in Medina and asked about his claims, and they held an open and robust dialogue in his very mosque. And one day, I love this story because one day, after several days of debate and dialogue, he notices that his Christian guests feel uncomfortable or look uncomfortable. And he asks them, has someone offended you? Is something wrong? Is there something I can do to make your life easier, to put you at ease? And they say, no one's offended us, but today is our day of worship. It's Sunday, and we need to find a church where we can go worship. And the Prophet responded to them that this mosque is a house of God, and you can worship here as Christians however you please without any restriction whatsoever. And history records that under the protection of the Prophet Muhammad himself, these Christians worshipped as Christians without any hesitation or restriction. Now you tell me, what kind of a religion would teach people to protect Christians from and let them worship as they please if that religion was somehow antagonistic to Christianity? Was this like some 4D chess move that we're going to gain their trust and let them worship and then suddenly convert them? It's such a nonsensical claim. That is the model that Muslims need to be following. And any Muslim who disobeys that model is not only antagonistic to the Prophet, but antagonistic to the very essence of Islam, which is to protect universal religious freedom. And this is what I love about you, Tim, in that we can come together as two brothers from different faiths, but under the same gracious God, to talk about our similarities and differences in a loving and sincere way, and walk away with a stronger understanding, which allows us just to build a better future for our children, for your children, for my children, for our children collectively. That, to me, is what Jesus Christ and Prophet Muhammad both taught, and that, I think, is what we should ask all folks to follow in those footsteps.
Well, listen, well said. Shared values, over shared beliefs, right? I respect what you believe. We're going to have our theological disagreements, of course, but who cares, right? Like how we live our neighbor is what matters, right? Because I'll tell you what, the people who are hurting, the people whose SNAP benefits are getting ripped out of their hands, they don't care if it's a Muslim or if it's a Christian. They don't care who it is. They need someone to help them, right? And so I totally agree. Listen, Qasim, I really appreciate you coming on. If folks want to find your work, where can they find you?
Just my website, QasimRashid.com, QasimRashid.com. That's my name. It's my handle across all platforms, whether you're on Instagram or TikTok or Blue Sky Threads. You can find me there, and I have a free Substack, no paywall, and reach out. Happy to have a dialogue whenever.
Awesome. Thanks, my friend. We'll do it again soon.
Thanks, brother. Peace out.